This video was brought to you by Brilliant, and the first 200 people to use the link below will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Over the last few weeks, the UK and EU have really stepped up their bickering over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The UK first made it clear that they didn't like how the protocol was working way back in July 2021, and the issue has been on the back burner ever since. But things really came to a head yesterday when Liz Truss announced that the UK government was going to introduce domestic legislation to override the parts of the protocol that the UK government didn't like, provoking disbelief and fury among EU diplomats. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at these new plans, whether or not they'll actually be implemented, and how the EU might respond. Before we get into the more recent developments, a bit of context. The Northern Ireland Protocol is an addendum to Boris Johnson's Brexit deal that describes the trading relationship between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. It's a pretty technical document, but the basic idea behind it is that it puts a regulatory and customs border in the Irish Sea. This leaves Northern Ireland within the EU single market in order to keep the border open and protect the integrity of the EU single market, while still allowing the UK, or at least Great Britain, to be able to diverge from the EU's trade policy outside of Europe's market. Now, despite claiming that Johnson's Brexit deal was oven-ready, just a year or so after its implementation, the government decided that they didn't actually like the protocol, and that things needed amending. In fact, cracks first started showing in March of 2021, when the UK government announced that they would be unilaterally extending the grace period on export health certificates for animal products moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And this has basically happened with every deadline for every grace period we've met so far. And it looks like the UK is planning to extend these deadlines indefinitely, effectively putting off the hard part of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Anyway, the UK went from subtle opposition through delays into something considerably more explicit when they published a command paper in July of last year. In the command paper, the UK government set out basically two objections to the protocol. Firstly, they argued that the protocol in its current form was straining community relations in Northern Ireland. Here, the UK was referring to the consternation in Northern Ireland's unionist community against the protocol, which we've already detailed in another video. Essentially, unionists don't like the protocol because it puts a regulatory border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, and as such, they consider it to be a threat to the union. Their second objection was that the UK government wanted to drop all aspects of EU law from the protocol and remove any role for the European Court of Justice from enforcing the protocol, allegedly because both of these things undermine the UK's sovereignty. So the UK had put its cards on the table and announced its major issues with the protocol. So the two sides began negotiating to make changes in September 2021. But negotiations didn't really go anywhere. So the UK government threatened to trigger Article 16. Article 16 is basically the emergency clause in the protocol, which states that if the protocol leads to serious economic, societal, or environmental difficulties that are liable to persist or lead to a diversion of trade, then the UK or EU can unilaterally suspend application of the protocol, effectively scrapping the protocol altogether. After a lot of brinkmanship, the UK eventually backed down from triggering Article 16, and negotiations continued. This time though, arch-Brexiteer David Frost was replaced by Liz Truss as the UK's lead negotiator, and many commentators assumed that she'd be less hawkish than her predecessor. However, despite some early optimism in Brussels, over the last few weeks, Truss has taken a similar line to Frost, arguing that the protocol is unsustainable and that the EU's proposed amendments don't go far enough. Instead of triggering Article 16 though, Truss announced on Tuesday that the government planned to introduce domestic legislation that would contradict and override elements of the protocol. This legislation will presumably involve reducing checks on trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, as well as getting rid of the European Court of Justice's role within the process. But why is Truss using domestic legislation instead of Article 16? Well, fortunately, we spoke to Brexit expert Professor Katie Hayward from Queen's University Belfast to talk about exactly this. And here's what she had to say.
So the big question with Article 16 is how exactly it would be used and what exactly it could do in terms of making a positive difference. So as Liz Truss mentions in her statement, we are already in a situation in which the protocol is not being fully implemented, and we have grace periods that exist at the moment for the most onerous parts of the protocol that are ongoing indefinitely. So in terms of what Article 16 would do, it's quite limited because it would have to be limited in scope and time, something very specific. And so the question would be, well, if you targeted something like not needing all certification for agri-food products, you may well say, well, what difference does that make? Because at the moment, we don't need all that certification anyway. So that was a big challenge for them. If they were to use it more ambitiously, with a bigger scope for Article 16, they would immediately face a legal challenge. In the sense that they were using it inappropriately. So Article 16 was problematic for them. Coming into this different approach in which they legislate to give themselves, as a government, the power to override all or part of the protocol down the line. They may face opposition in Parliament, especially from the Lords, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they want to equip themselves to breach the protocol or override it without facing such legal challenges. That may reduce the risk of challenge domestically, but obviously then we're talking about direct confrontation with the EU. And this is what is obviously a very live matter at the moment.
Now, Truss's plan does sound a bit fishy, and it's probably in violation of Article 4 of the Withdrawal Agreement, which says that UK domestic law should be compliant with the obligations under the Brexit deal. Nonetheless, Truss has argued that changes to the protocol are necessary to protect the Good Friday Agreement, which determines political relations between unionist and nationalist communities, and as such, making these changes is so important that it supersedes any other legal requirements. Something that Professor Hayward had some pretty clear thoughts on.
So I don't think there is such a concept as, one international agreement having supremacy over another. Now, we should bear in mind, of course, the Good Friday Belfast Agreement is a very unique agreement in that it's not just between the British and Irish governments and written into their respective laws and constitutions. It's also between the parties in Northern Ireland, and it's, of course, underpinning a very complicated and fragile peace process. So it is a unique agreement. But it would be very peculiar to imagine that it overrides other international agreements. Fundamentally, I mean, a law is a law, and to break a law is to break a law. So I think the idea that the British government is equipping itself to disapply all or part of the protocol is a significant move to be making.
By the way, the full interview is going to be included in today's TLDR daily briefing. The channel is linked below, so make sure you're subscribed. Anyway, what happens next? Well, Truss has made it clear that the government still prefers a negotiated settlement, and this is more of a threat than a foregone conclusion. The legislation also won't be introduced to Parliament until later this year, so there's still time for negotiations. Nonetheless, agreement between the UK and EU looks unlikely. While some of Truss's proposals make sense, the EU are unlikely to agree to getting rid of EU law or the ECJ. And the UK's plan for a, quote, dual regulatory regime have already been criticised by the EU. That plan, by the way, would basically allow Northern Irish businesses to produce goods for the UK which don't meet EU standards. But Europe says this would compromise the integrity of the EU single market. Regardless, if nothing is agreed and the UK actually goes through with its plans, the EU haven't yet said how they'll respond. They could scrap the entire Brexit agreement via Article 779, although this would require a year's notice. Alternatively, they could suspend the deal via Article 521, although this also has a 9-month notice period. Perhaps the most extreme option, though, would be to suspend access to EU waters via Article 506, which only requires 7 days' notice. If they did that, though, that could very easily kick off a nasty trade war between the UK and EU, which wouldn't end well for the UK. As a final thing, it's worth noting that all of this is a symptom of the fact that Brexiteers and the EU still haven't found a way to square the so-called Irish trilemma. How can the UK have an independent trade policy without creating a border in the Irish Sea or on the island of Ireland? And this is why the government's arguments here look a bit disingenuous. The current tensions in Ireland, which the government claims it cares so much about, were entirely predictable and foreseen by many Brexit analysts at the time. And until this trilemma can be sorted out, it looks like tensions could rumble on for some time. And if squaring triangles sounds difficult for Liz Truss, then maybe she should check out Brilliant. Brilliant is an online STEM learning platform that teaches you everything you need to know to better understand the modern world. Baffled by investment and finance? Well, they've got courses on maths and quantitative finance. Confused by coding? Well, they've got everything from the very basics right through to quantum computing. Unclear why you're losing millions? Well, there's no guarantee that Brilliant can help with that, but they do have courses on cryptocurrency and gambling. You get the point. Everything you want to learn about STEM is covered by Brilliant. And the best thing is that all of their courses are designed by award-winning instructors and built upon the principle of active learning. So you're gaining STEM knowledge by actually doing it. So if you want to improve with STEM, then you can sign up to Brilliant at brilliant.org/TLDR UK. And the first 200 people to do so will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for supporting the channel.